Why do you suck at writing? Well, you don't have to listen to me because today we are going to hear from Yukio Mishima on why so many novelists suck in 2024. And this segment is from an essay Mishima wrote in 1968 when the publishing world, literacy, and the arts were kind of first starting their freefall to where they are now in the modern era. And if you guys don't already know, Right Conscious is the headquarters of everything related to Yukio Mishima here on YouTube. This isn't a channel where we sit and write a script and diss on Mishima because PewDiePie made a video and we Googled it and like, oh my God, he's a fascist. We have to react. No, we actually cover his philosophy, his life, and his books at length. And if you don't believe me, go check the playlist down below where there is an ever-blossoming library on Mishima. And enough for me. Let us now hear from Mishima. Someone who begins writing novels at 20 has no option but to expand his powers of imagination on the basis of what he has felt until that age. That is rather a problem of sensitivity than experience. We, in the midst of the easily wounded fragility of sensitivity, discover incongruities with our life, and in order to bury the gaps in those incongruities, seek to play in the world of words. Because that is the origin of many novelists, the strong power of will, endurance, and other powers of the fully fledged human being sufficient to taste true life, consequently, end up being used when they begin to write novels. Abilities that are supposed to be useful for life are all devoted to areas of competence for being a novelist. They harden as professionals, and they can seek the most pure, most unsullied, and most intense experiences of their own lives only in the life of sensitivity prior to their boyhood. That writers are often said to mature toward their maiden work is for no other reason than that. For writers, it is that unstable work formed from the most keen sensitivity when their experience of life was yet inefficient that becomes the treasured home of their life experience to which they will return repeatedly. Not only boyhood, but also infancy is a treasured home for writers. There, life is not an experience, but merely a dream. Not reason, but merely sensitivity. They also evade the responsibilities of adults and are protected by them. This is a different subject, but that in the political action of the National Federation of Students' Self-Government Associations, a character as a sort of artistic act cannot be completely gotten rid of is because they are still glued to this sort of juvenile world and politics of dreams and concepts. We do not begin life satisfied with it from the first. Satisfied people are quite exceptional. This will remain the same no matter what sort of social revolution succeeds. Art begins from there. And Mishima is dropping absolute fire because one of my favorite poets, one of the best American poets and social critics of all time, Robert Bly, back in the 1960s, was blowing the whistle saying that MFA programs and the National Endowment for Art programs in the West were going to ruin art because it was going to teach artists, first of all, how to get money without making people care about their work, because that's what this exchange is. If I make money if I release a book right now and self-publish it, people at some level had to care enough to buy it and to read it and spread how they liked it through word of mouth so that I could eventually get a lot of sales because they cared. But if I got that same $50,000 from an endowment program or from an MFA program in fellowships, then I actually never learned how to actually interact with the modern world, how to actually make humans in 2024 care about literature. And the way you learn that is not in dreams. You don't learn that in your little hovel. You have to go out into the world and take action and understand. And that's where real art comes from. And I have seen this time and time again. I've known so many MFAs. They're like, I didn't get another fellowship. What am I ever going to do? 99%, and this is, it may even be closer to 100% of people who get MFAs, they spend 3 years in the program. They get paid. They have their tuition waived. They get paid. 99% of people who go through an MFA program for creative writing do not write a book during those 3 years, aren't even close to writing a book. They just do nothing because it's like welfare. They are being supported and there's no incentive to actually go out and do anything, to actually go and live life and write something good. And now we've given this career as a novelist some validity through the MFA programs that I know so many people who are absolute hacks, who have no talent in writing and are just telling the parents that they have talent and are just kind of milking their parents and taking 10 years off. And then when it doesn't work out, they just go get a random job, but they never really did anything. They were living in the world of dreams and words. And now bringing this back to you, The same thing is probably true in your case. And I know it's true in my case. I love books. I've always loved books. I was not the toughest dude in high school. I was reading in class. But at some point, I realized, luckily, that was all bullshit, that I had to go out into the world and do a little bit of vandalizing, have a little bit of fun, go to some parties, spend time out in nature and exploring the United States. I hitchhiked from Las Vegas to Calgary and had so many wild experiences. I lived all over the country, working random jobs. And like that life experience is what made me who I am. Without any of that, I wouldn't be here right now. If I just went and got my degree in 4 years and went and got my next degree in 2 years, I'd be like every other Joe Schmo. But instead, I am activated. I'm speaking to you. And you can flip the script. Because when we look back at the start of Mishima's quote, he says that the novelist has no option but to expand his powers of imagination on the basis of what he has felt until that age. And it's a crazy thing that happens, but Robert Bly, who I mentioned earlier, said that no writer should publish until after they are 30 years old. They shouldn't worry about that at all. They should just be practicing and spending time alone and taking action out in the world. And because if you don't, your imagination gets too far ahead of your body and you become detached. You aren't grounded in reality. And so a lot of us are actually at that point, even if you aren't necessarily a writer yet, because when you look at postmodernist fiction, when you read Infinite Jest or you watch Midsummer or whatever other piece of art that is like really inspiring to you, and then you reflect on your own personal artistic aspirations, you're like, oh, wow, I have to do that now. And kind of the bar keeps getting higher and higher and your imagination keeps reaching further and further. And so it kind of automatically happens now because of how art has kind of spiraled into kind of a hyper reality. But you can pull yourself back. And how do you do that? Let me tell you, you do that by doing 3 different things. The first of which is actually, and this is crazy, I know all the incels out there might shit their pants, is actually developing real human relationships. And I know, guys, I'm not here worshiping at the altar of Mishima. Homeboy was a schizophrenic who did so many crazy things in his life. But one of the most undervalued ways to ground yourself is to actually find a great relationship and great friendships. Less people than ever are getting married, are engaging in serious relationships. And I understand that there are superficial people everywhere, men and women, and you have to wade through a sea of NPCs to actually find someone good. And there's trauma and problems, and maybe it will take you 15 years. But if you can work on that, if you can find a great relationship partner who can ground you, then you have a foundation that won't let you go commit seppuku most of the time. Same goes for friendships. If you have great friends and are actually doing things with them, not just hanging out in the backyard and smoking weed and watching the Steelers or playing Madden or doing stuff like that, but actually going out and exploring and progressing with each other out in the world, that is great. That's what Mishima did. That was basically why he started that militia. He knew that community was the key to everything. And even in Japanese culture, if you look at samurai culture and just, the whole thing in general, very community oriented. Brotherhood, loyalty, dedication, all very big principles. So that's step number 1. Step number 2, which actually relates to samurai culture on how to ground yourself and pull yourself back, is spending time out in nature. It doesn't have to be ambitious. You don't have to go hike a mountain. You could, but just generally going back out there and letting a lot of the simulacra wash away. A simulacra is a copy of a copy, and that is almost everything that we are inundated with in this world. You're watching a simulacra right now, but out in nature, there are no simulacra. It is all original. Nature is the OG. And so by spending time out there, you can actually kind of wash away, especially if you go out there without any ambition and just spend a significant amount of time out in nature, taking walks, looking around, enjoying yourself. A lot of that washes away. And when you look at Japanese culture and authors like Basho, who Mishima holds in a very high regard, that's what they were doing. They were writing without ambition. They were spending time out in nature. They were not focusing on the superficial aspects of life. Japanese writing has gotten away from their nature writing, but the Chinese wilderness poets, Li Po, Cold Mountain, Tu Fu, all those guys, Basho, among others, Ikkyu in Japan, their nature poetry is some of the greatest ever written. Their poetry is some of the greatest ever written and very underread. And Japanese and Chinese culture has moved very, very far away from that now, even including Misha. Mishima does, but Mishima actually does in like a lot of his novels in the Sea of Fertility, tetralogy, really does kind of give nature precedence and synchronicity in the universe. All of that does have this, especially in Runaway Horses, there really is that connection. But the third thing that you need to do, obviously, is contemplation, silent contemplation, solitude. It could be meditation or it could just martial arts, but doing things in silence. One could say suffering in silence, moving through the shadow work in silence. Nothing is more important than that for reeling in your imagination, because your imagination needs to be a weapon. It doesn't need to be scattered. You want, when you're doing art, to walk with your body, action, and imagination together, like everything at one. And we could say the same thing in reverse. You know, there are jocks out there, random assholes who try to do art all the time, and their imagination, their body, their ambition is way ahead of their imagination. And so they need to actually temper their body. They need to stop going out and projecting themselves in the world so much and relax and actually spend more time being a nerd and and daydreaming and doing stuff like that. And so it's a balance thing, but most of us, especially if you're watching a video on Mishima, you most likely need to kind of reel in your imagination and unify it with your body. And Mishima, man, he's really spitting fire. I mean, I'll show you guys. Let's read the end of this quote again. He says that in the midst of wounded fragility of sensitivity, discover incongruities with our life. And in order to bury the gaps in those incongruities, seek to play in the world of words. And this is what happens. So when you start as a teenager, adolescent, or young adult, kind of an intellectual awakening, you start to look at the things and incongruencies in your life. You're like, damn, maybe my parents aren't so great. Or, wow, the country I'm living in, the police state, man, this is really crazy. These friends I have, wow, they're actually kind of negative. Why would I want to be around them? And so this is what I did. I remember when I was starting to figure out all these crazy things about myself and about my life, I just went off into words. I went off into knowledge, became an atheist, became a logic bro, started attacking others online with words and in person with words as a way to kind of not take action in my own life, not to start to do martial arts, because I finally started to realize this. And when I was 18, started doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and other martial arts and yoga, spending time out in nature. But before that, I was just on this rampage. And this is what a lot of people out online, if you go to Reddit and look at all the negativity over there, if you look how people act, they are using pure logic. When they were 15, 16 years old, and they looked at the incongruencies in their life, filled it with knowledge, and have built a straw man for decades now around it. It's insane. We don't want to do that. And that never creates good art. Obviously, art requires the intellect, but it can't be too divorced from the body. And Mishima says that some of this is unrecoverable, that in your early 20s, that's the time when you have the most energy. You don't have responsibilities. You don't have a wife. You don't have these things. And that energy should be used toward life, because for the rest of your life, you can be doing contemplation. You can be doing the thinking man stuff like writing or business or whatever else. But it's harder as you get older with addiction. So if you have an addiction, if you have a personality problem, let's say at the age of 18, it's much easier to solve it then because its origin is much closer. But if you play around and don't solve that, and it's very hard to actually solve addictions when you're in the creative world. There's a great book called Witness the Fire, Creativity and the Veil of Addiction. And it talks about why most creative people are addicts and how they kind of connect, and how you kind of have to take a break from creativity to solve a lot of addictions, because it kind of taps in to the kind of same system of fantasy that addicts function in. And so if you are now 35 years old and you have these problems, you have a porn addiction, or if you are a drinker of these things, it's going to be so much harder to figure that out when you could have got all that figured out earlier in life. And so now you're 35, you're stressed, you have these problems, and the easiest thing to do is drink. And you're also held back. How many novelists, once again, entered MFA programs, did all these things, and now they are broke a decade later. I mean, this happened to me at some level. If I would have just focused on some of those life stuff earlier, I would have more time, energy, money, and freedom now to be able to explore all the things and ideas that I want to explore. And so if you never solve this, you're going to have a shaky foundation. And eventually this is going to make your writing suck. Eventually. So some writers can logic their way through, but we see enough of that. Logic isn't creative, and that's why people get bored. Like, that's why some authors write the same novel over and over again, because they don't have an actual creative spirit. And so if you actually cultivate and have a unison harmony of pen and sword, you have unlimited creative freedom. Nothing will be the same story again. This is how Mishima wrote prolifically, and I would say didn't repeat himself very often. I've read at least 20 Mishima novels, and the style is somewhat the same, and that's cool. That's to be expected. But the stories, the ideas, they're all varied. It's actually kind of bizarre. And so Mishima says that that you will continue drawing from that unstable foundation, that childhood, that thing, and until you solve that problem. I've given you guys, hopefully, 3 different ways to make your writing not suck anymore. And it may be like, wait, shouldn't you be giving writing advice? No. What you need to do is develop real relationships, start spending more time out in nature and contemplating more. That will make your writing better than any writing exercise, any writing workshop will do. And if you do that for a while, and then you obviously practice writing and continue to improve in your craft and put the time in, 5 years from now, you will look back and be like, holy shit, what was I doing? Because that's what's happening now. We have a bunch of random people who shouldn't be getting published because there are diversity quotas at publishing houses. There are university presses just throwing anybody and everyone that fits their quota out into the world with a bunch of shit writing. The trust economy is lessening in the literature world. People don't trust new books anymore or new authors and are turning to things they can trust more, like short form media, because you don't have to buy in as much. If a short or reel sucks, you can just swipe to the next one. But if a book sucks halfway through, you feel betrayed. And so dreams, concepts are important, but they have to be unified. So what do you guys think? What can we do better? What have you learned from this video? Let me know. Are you ready to go on this journey toward a literary renaissance with me? Because I would love to have you. If you guys enjoyed this video, go check out the link, some of the links down in the descriptions below. I have a free writing school over there where I help you build your audience, become a better writer. I have a Mishima book club I'm about to start down below. A bunch of cool stuff. I would love to see you guys down there and in some of those other communities so we can talk personally. And I will see you guys in another Mishima video very soon.